Um, so when Robin Tunnel texted on the Yeshiva group chat about if anyone wanted to volunteer to talk about the Poland trip, I was uncertain because this is my first time speaking in front of everyone in the base this year, but I felt like this was something important to talk about. So I asked Robin Tunnel and said, could I please talk about our time in Krakow over Shabbos? Because when we were going on the trip, there had been issues about COVID and testing and being safe. And because of that, we were in Shabbos, we were in Krakow for Shabbos. And I think it was like the first time that it had been done on the trip. Not sure. One of the first times. And what struck me there was how empty it felt. We were in, I think, 3 or 4 different shows over that Shabbos, and it was basically just us on the trip, just our group. And even in different parts, even later on the trip and before on the trip, these were these beautiful, historic, hundreds of years old places where people gathered to pray, and it was empty. It was defaced. Some of it had been restored, but a lot of it was ruined in some ways. So I felt that since Ron Tunnel said that I'd be the first one to speak, I thought it'd be important to just kind of set the stage by thinking about just the mindset of how much had changed pre and post war, and even in the years following the war in Poland. Polish Jewry, there's a history of about 1,000 years of Jews living in Poland, and it actually was one of the largest Jewish communities within Eastern Europe on the eve of the war. About 10% of the Polish population was Jewish, which at the time the census estimates it was about 3.3 million Jews. Specifically in Krakow, the Jewish population was about 350,000 people, and that made up about 20% of the city's population. So one out of every 5 people you saw was likely a Jew. That statistic is very different following the war, and even nowadays it's even lower. Of 3.3 million people, a million Jews living in Poland pre-war, only 380,000 of them were documented to have survived. And out of the 350-ish thousand people, Jews in Krakow, that went down to about 30,000. It's like taking the population of the United States, which is about 329 million, and just removing the whole entire population of Texas, which is about 30 million. Or if you took out the population of New York once, and then half the population of New York again. That was how big of a removal that it was. The Jewish population, 90% was killed within Poland. On, I think it was Friday night, the chief rabbi of Krakow came to speak to us at the shul after we had finished Kabbalah Shabbat. And he was speaking to us about what he does engaging in the Jewish community, and people who come to him saying that their grandparents on their deathbed said, "I'm Jewish." And he's trying to get us to understand how large of a disconnect there was. And I looked into it more afterwards, and how in the Soviet Union, of those 30,000 that stayed, that survived, a small portion of them actually stayed post-war. And of those, after the 6-Day War, a lot of them were either expelled, and this was only in Poland, or they hid their Judaism. So, and it was interesting to me. And so I did more research. I looked into it more, and it was astounding to me, thinking back on it, that here is a person which is trying to raise awareness to the Jewish community, and he was talking to us about some festival that happens in Krakow as commemoration of the Jewish community that used to be there, which was great. But the total Jewish population of Poland now, after the war, after the people who fled or hid their Judaism, that's a documented Jew who will say they're a Jew is only about 20,000 people at the maximum. And each statistic that I looked at, each drop, each change just hit me more and more about how large, how drastic a change has happened over the years. I think that, like, if there's one thing to just think about this year and every year as Yom HaShoah comes around, is how few Holocaust survivors there are left in the world today. I was reading an article this morning about how many Holocaust survivors there are documented in the state of Israel, and the number is currently at 161,400 people, with their average age being 85.5 years old, and less than around 20 of them have made it to over 100 years old. On average, 40 of them pass away every day. And running the numbers, if they pass away at that rate, then at the maximum, there will be no more Holocaust survivors living in Israel in 11 years. But they're getting older, they're aging. So that is an optimistic number. So if there's anything that I want to take in as Yom HaShoah starts, as we are getting into the headspace for this year's and next year's and every year's Yom HaShoah, is just how empty and how much has been lost, so that we can ourselves carry the torch and carry their memories for them.